I was Maya Collins, 29 years old, a graphic designer whose life felt like a series of endless gray Mondays. My apartment, a modest space in the city's endless sprawl, was filled with canvases that never quite came to life and sketchbooks that remained half full. The city around me pulsed with constant energy, but I was trapped in a routine that left me feeling invisible, surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. Each morning began with the same commute, the same crowded subway cars, the same office filled with fluorescent lights and the hum of computers. My job was stable, but it was a cage of monotony, each project a reminder of how far I'd drifted from the dreams I once nurtured. The pressure was relentless. Friends married, started families, or chased adventures across the globe, while I sat behind my screen, crafting logos and layouts that never sparked joy. I'd tell myself it was enough, that stability mattered, but the weight of unfulfillment settled deep in my chest. I longed for something more, something undefined, elusive, yet urgent. Not far from my daily path, Leo Turner had just returned to the city. At 32, Leo was the embodiment of restless freedom, a travel blogger whose years abroad had painted his life with colors I could only imagine. Our childhood friendship had been brief but vivid, rooted in the small coastal town where we both grew up until his family moved away without warning. I hadn't seen him since, yet the memories of shared laughter and sunlit afternoons on the shore lingered like an old photograph. That evening, the city wore a heavy raincoat. The streets glistened under the glow of street lamps, and the usual buzz had softened to a gentle murmur. I ducked into a quiet cafe to escape the downpour, the smell of coffee and damp earth mingling in the air. I chose a corner table, pulling my jacket tighter as I settled in, hoping to drown my swirling thoughts in the warmth of the room. Leo was there too, sitting by the window with a journal open and a camera resting beside him. His hair was longer, tousled in a way that spoke of travel and wind, and his eyes held the gleam of someone who had seen too much and yet craved more. Our eyes met across the room, a flicker of recognition that startled me. It was a moment suspended between past and present, a brief collision of lives that had diverged and now converged again. I hesitated, unsure whether to approach the stranger who felt so familiar. But the pull was undeniable. I stood and walked over, the sound of rain tapping a quiet rhythm behind us. "Leo?" I asked, my voice a tentative thread weaving through the hum of the cafe. He looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Maya, it's been a long time." We sat together, the rain outside a steady companion. The conversation started hesitantly, words catching on the edges of memory. We spoke of the town where we grew up, of the suddenness of his departure, and the years that had stretched between us. I told him about the city, the job, the suffocating routine, while he shared stories of distant lands, sunsets over foreign seas, and the endless roads that had carried him far from here. In those first exchanges, I felt the walls I'd built begin to crack. Leo's free spirit was a stark contrast to the grayness I'd wrapped myself in, and yet there was something grounding about his presence. We were two fragments of a shared past, now piecing together a mosaic neither of us had expected to find. The cafe's warmth seeped into my bones as we talked, and the rain outside softened to a drizzle. I realized how starved I was for connection, for someone who understood the quiet desperation beneath the surface. Leo's stories ignited a flicker of longing, a reminder that life could hold more than the predictable grind I had come to accept. As we parted that night, the city's lights reflecting in puddles on the pavement, I carried with me a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. The encounter was fleeting, yet it stirred something deep within me, a whisper of possibility in the midst of routine. For the first time in a long while, the future felt less like a fixed path and more like a landscape waiting to be explored. The next time I saw Leo, it was as if no years had passed, yet everything felt unfamiliar. We met again by chance, or maybe it was fate, at the same cafe where our conversation had first unfolded. The rain had returned, a steady drizzle that blurred the city lights into soft halos. He was sitting alone, sketching in a small notebook, his fingers stained with ink and coffee. When I approached, our eyes locked with a mix of surprise and hesitation, the weight of time pressing between us. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, as if afraid to shatter the fragile connection that still lingered. "Hey, Maya," he replied, a smile flickering, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty beneath it. We sat down, the air thick with unspoken questions. Recognition was there. But so was the awkwardness of two strangers who once knew each other intimately. The years had carved lines in places, altered tones, but beneath it all, the same souls sat across the table. Our conversation began with cautious small talk. The weather, the city's changes, mutual acquaintances, but soon the veil lifted. Leo's openness was disarming. He spoke freely of his travels, the freedom and loneliness entwined in his nomadic life. I shared glimpses of my own world, the dull routines, the suffocating expectations, the dreams buried beneath layers of self-doubt. I found myself guarded, hesitating to reveal too much, afraid of exposing the cracks in my carefully constructed facade. Leo noticed it, gently prodding, not to force but to invite. "You don't have to pretend here," he said softly. "I remember the Maya who chased the horizon with me, who believed in impossible things." His words stirred something buried deep inside me. The spark of a girl who once believed in magic and adventure. I recalled those childhood days in our coastal town, running barefoot on sun-warmed rocks, collecting seashells, inventing stories about the distant ships we watched sail away. We were fearless then, our imaginations boundless, unafraid of what the future held. The contrast between that girl and the woman sitting across from Leo was stark. I realized how much I had retreated, how the weight of life had dimmed the light I once carried. But Leo's presence was like a mirror, reflecting the parts of myself I'd forgotten or ignored. As the evening deepened, our conversation shifted from memories to fears. Leo spoke of the moments he had doubted his path, the loneliness that gnawed at him even amidst exotic landscapes. I confessed my own battle with uncertainty, the nagging question of whether I was wasting my life, trapped in a cycle I feared to break. There was a tension in the air, a delicate dance between vulnerability and self-protection. Leo's openness challenged my guardedness, and in that tension a connection grew. We were two people standing at the edge of something unknown, drawn together by shared longings and unspoken hopes. At one point Leo reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. A simple gesture yet laden with meaning. It was as if we were silently agreeing to trust each other, to explore what lay beyond the safe boundaries we had built. The cafe's warm glow seemed to cocoon us from the outside world, and for a moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. We were no longer just two adults burdened by the past. We were the children who once dreamed together, rediscovering that sense of wonder through each other's eyes. Before parting, Leo suggested we meet again to talk more, to share more. I nodded, a tentative hope blossoming in my chest. The rain had eased into a gentle mist as we stepped outside, the city's nightscape shimmering with possibility. I walked home with a strange lightness, as if the unexpected reunion had unlocked a door I hadn't dared to open. That night I lay awake, replaying our conversation. Leo's openness had stirred a longing I hadn't felt in years, the desire to break free, to embrace uncertainty rather than fear it. I realized that beneath my hesitation was a deep craving for connection, for someone who could see me beyond the surface. In the days that followed, our encounters became moments of escape from the monotony. Each meeting peeled back layers of guardedness, revealing fragments of ourselves we had kept hidden. We laughed over shared memories, debated dreams and disappointments, and challenged each other's fears. Leo's stories sparked my creativity, and I found myself sketching again, capturing the wildness of places he had been and the restless spirit that moved through him. In turn, I shared my work, hesitant at first, but encouraged by his genuine interest and support. Our conversations were not always easy. There were silences filled with unspoken doubts, moments when vulnerability felt like a risk too great to take. Yet, in those moments we learned to listen to each other and to ourselves. One evening, as we walked through the city's quiet streets, Leo spoke about the fear of never belonging, of always being the outsider chasing horizons. I confessed my own fear of never being enough, of settling for less than what I truly wanted. We realized that our fears, though different in shape, were threads woven from the same fabric of longing, for purpose, for belonging, for something real. As the weeks passed, the bond between us deepened. It was no longer just nostalgia or friendship. It was a quiet awakening, a mutual recognition of the possibility of change. Leo's free spirit challenged my caution, and my groundedness offered him a place to rest. Together we began to imagine what life could be beyond the confines of routine and fear. Our conversations became a safe space to dream, to stumble and to hope. The walls I had built around myself were starting to crumble, brick by brick, under the gentle persistence of Leo's presence. And in that unfolding connection, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new chapter, one where the past was not a chain but a foundation, and the future was a landscape waiting to be explored. Our connection grew quietly but unmistakably, threading itself through the folds of daily life, weaving a tapestry of shared moments that felt both fragile and steadfast. One evening, Leo suggested a spontaneous outing, a detour from the city's rigid rhythms. He wanted to visit a nearby park, a patch of green that felt worlds away from the concrete and glass I inhabited. I hesitated at first, the weight of responsibility tugging at me, but something in his eyes urged me on. We met as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of change. As we walked along winding paths lined with towering trees, the city's noise faded into a distant hum. For the first time in a long while, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen, the walls I'd built around myself softening under the gentle pressure of the natural world and Leo's steady presence. We talked about everything and nothing, our favorite childhood memories, the books that had shaped us, the music that stirred our souls. Leo shared stories of his travels, the colors and sounds that had left imprints on his heart, while I opened up about the creative spark that had been smothered by years of self-doubt. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a flicker of excitement as I described ideas I'd long buried. That night, back in my apartment, I found myself reaching for my sketchbook. The pages, once neglected, welcomed the flow of lines and colors that seemed to burst forth from a place I'd thought lost. I realized that Leo's influence was more than companionship. It was a catalyst, reigniting the passion for art that had been dormant. Our late-night talks became a ritual, a sanctuary where vulnerability was met with understanding rather than judgment. We shared stories of heartbreaks and betrayals, the wounds we carried silently beneath our smiles. Leo revealed the loneliness that often accompanied his nomadic lifestyle, the ache of fleeting connections and the struggle to find a place to call home. I confessed my fear of failure, the paralyzing weight of expectations that had kept me tethered to a life that felt hollow. In these conversations, we found a mirror for our own struggles, a reflection that made the burdens lighter and the path forward clearer. We learned to embrace uncertainty together, recognizing that growth often demanded stepping into the unknown. One weekend, Leo invited me on a hike to a nearby hilltop, a place he said held the promise of breathtaking views and perhaps a little clarity. The morning was overcast, clouds heavy with the threat of rain. As we ascended the rugged trails, the wind picked up, tugging at our clothes and hair. The storm that followed was fierce, a sudden downpour that drenched us to the bone, thunder rolling overhead like the roar of some ancient beast. We found shelter beneath a cluster of trees, shivering but laughing at the absurdity of our situation. In that wild, tempestuous moment, something shifted between us. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within, the fears, the doubts, the desire to break free. We spoke honestly, our voices rising and falling with the rain. I admitted my fear of change, the comfort I found in routine despite its suffocation. Leo shared his own doubts, the loneliness that shadowed his adventures. The storm passed, leaving behind a cleansed sky and a world washed anew. We stood together looking out over the valley, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. It was a moment of quiet revelation, a shared understanding that growth required courage, and that neither of us had to face it alone. Our bond deepened in the days that followed, evolving from the nostalgia of childhood friendship into something more profound and transformative. We became collaborators in creativity and life, inspiring each other to push boundaries and embrace imperfections. Leo's free spirit challenged my cautious nature, while my groundedness offered him a place of rest and reflection. Together we navigated the complexities of vulnerability, the fear of being seen wholly, and the risk of opening ourselves to hurt. There were moments of tension and misunderstanding, but always a willingness to listen and learn. Our connection was not a fairy tale but a quiet, steady unfolding of trust and mutual growth. I found myself experimenting with new styles in my art, blending the vivid imagery Leo described with my own experiences. He, in turn, began to document our shared moments, capturing the subtle shifts in both of us through his writing and photography. Our creative collaboration became a language of its own, a dialogue that transcended words. One evening, as we sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by sketches and photographs, Leo looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "You're different now," he said softly. "There's a light in you I haven't seen before." I smiled, feeling the truth in his words. The transformation wasn't sudden or dramatic but a gradual unveiling, a reclaiming of parts of myself I had hidden away. Our journey together was not without challenges. Family and friends questioned the changes they saw, skeptical of the risks we were taking. Self-doubt still crept in, whispering fears of failure and loss. Yet, with each other's support, we learned to face those fears, to step into the unknown with trembling but determined steps. The city, once a backdrop of monotony, began to feel alive with possibility. Every street corner held a story, every encounter a chance to rediscover. Our spontaneous outings became adventures, the city's hidden gems unfolding like secret treasures. Through it all, Leo and I forged a partnership that was both grounding and liberating, a balance of independence and companionship. We embraced the imperfections in ourselves and each other, finding strength in vulnerability and courage in connection. And so, as autumn edged closer, painting the city in shades of amber and gold, we stood at the cusp of change. The past was a tapestry of memories and lessons, and the future stretched out before us, vast and unknown. Together we were ready to step forward, hand in hand, into whatever awaited. The decision to leave my corporate job didn't come suddenly, but rather as a slow unraveling of certainty that had once seemed unshakable. Each day at the office felt heavier, the walls closing in, the colors of my world dulling further. Leo's stories, his unwavering belief in chasing authenticity, had planted seeds in a garden I thought long dead. One evening, after a long day swallowed by deadlines and meaningless revisions, I found myself staring at the blank canvas of my sketchbook. The question that had been whispering in my mind for weeks finally demanded an answer. Was I willing to risk everything for a chance at something real? I told Leo over coffee, my voice trembling between fear and resolve. He listened, eyes steady and encouraging, the kind of presence that made vulnerability feel safe. "It's scary," I admitted, "but I think I need to try." His smile was quiet but fierce, a beacon in the fog of doubt. "I'll be here," he said simply, "whatever comes." The days that followed were a whirlwind of practicalities and emotions. I handed in my resignation, a letter that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Friends and family reacted with a mixture of concern and skepticism, their caution echoing the fears I wrestled with inside. "Are you sure?" they asked. "It's risky. What if it doesn't work out?" The question stung but also crystallized my determination. I wanted to live a life shaped by passion, not fear. With Leo's support, I immersed myself in a new creative project, a visual anthology inspired by his travels and the stories he carried in his heart. Together, we brainstormed, mapped out ideas, and dove into late-night work sessions filled with excitement and uncertainty. Challenges surfaced as expected. Self-doubt crept in, threatening to unravel the fragile confidence I was building. There were days when the weight of instability felt suffocating, when the absence of a steady paycheck was a harsh reminder of the risks taken. Leo faced his own battles, family who questioned his choices, the loneliness that sometimes returned despite our closeness. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, the tension between us surfaced. Frustration and fear tangled in words, a rare moment of discord that shook the foundation we had built. But rather than retreat, we confronted it head-on. We laid bare our anxieties, the fear of failure, the terror of losing each other, the vulnerability that came with stepping into the unknown. In that raw exchange, something shifted. We realized that embracing vulnerability wasn't a weakness but a strength, a bridge that connected us more deeply. We made a silent pact to face the uncertainties together, to support each other through the chaos and the calm. Joy found its way back through the cracks. We celebrated small victories, the first completed sketches, the positive feedback from friends, the moments when creativity flowed effortlessly. We danced in the kitchen, laughter echoing against the walls, savoring the freedom that came from living authentically. Balancing independence with companionship was a delicate dance. Leo encouraged me to trust my instincts, to pursue my vision without losing myself in the process. I reminded him of the value in grounding and stability, the need for rest and reflection. We learned to navigate space and closeness, carving out moments for ourselves while nurturing the bond that grew stronger each day. Our imperfections became threads woven into the fabric of our partnership, flaws embraced rather than hidden. We accepted that growth was messy and nonlinear, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. Together we cultivated patience and compassion, both for ourselves and each other. One afternoon, as autumn leaves spiraled outside my window, I sat surrounded by sketches and notes, the project taking shape in ways I had only dreamed. Leo was nearby, writing in his journal, the quiet hum of creativity filling the room. I looked at him and felt a surge of gratitude, not just for what we were creating, but for the journey we had embarked on together. Our commitment was more than shared dreams. It was a promise to live authentically, to face fears with courage, and to embrace the unpredictable tide of life. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, uncertainty felt like an invitation rather than a threat. In the glow of that moment, I understood that transformation wasn't a destination but a continuous unfolding, a dance of letting go and holding on, of daring and trusting. And with Leo by my side, I was ready to keep moving forward, step by step, into the life we were shaping together. The night of my first art exhibition arrived with a quiet thrill that settled deep in my chest, a mixture of triumph and vulnerability swirling beneath the surface. The gallery was a modest space in the heart of the city, its white walls bathed in soft light that made every brushstroke and sketch pulse with newfound life. Friends and strangers mingled, their voices weaving a comforting background hum as I moved through the room, heart pounding with a blend of pride and disbelief. Leo was there, standing at the edge of the crowd, his camera slung casually over his shoulder, eyes bright with the kind of pride that made me catch my breath. When our gazes met, he smiled. An unspoken thank you, a recognition of the journey we had traveled together. His presence was a steady anchor in the sea of faces, a reminder that this moment was more than personal achievement. It was the culmination of shared dreams and quiet courage. I found myself drawn to a corner where a sketchbook lay open, its pages filled with raw, unfiltered moments. Images inspired by Leo's stories, our conversations, and the wild spirit that had reignited my creativity. It was a gift I had prepared for him, a symbol of the transformation sparked by our connection. When I handed it to him later, his fingers traced the edges gently, eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "This means everything." In return, Leo had dedicated a blog post to our story, an intimate narrative of chance, rediscovery, and the power of meaningful connections to alter the course of a life. Reading his words, I felt seen in a way that transcended surface appearances. His writing captured the essence of what we shared, the courage to embrace uncertainty, to break free from the confines of fear and routine. As the evening unfolded, conversations deepened beyond the art on the walls. Friends asked about the journey, the risks taken, the moments of doubt and exhilaration. I spoke honestly, feeling the weight of years of silence lift with each word. Leo stood beside me, his support unwavering, a partner not just in creativity but in life. The city outside was alive with lights and possibility, a reflection of the path that had led me here. It was a path paved with unexpected encounters, shared vulnerabilities, and the willingness to leap into the unknown. Leo and I had become catalysts for each other's growth, our lives entwined in a dance of mutual discovery and acceptance. Later, as the gallery emptied and the night grew quiet, we stepped outside together into the cool air. The promise of new adventures shimmered between us like stars waiting to be reached. We spoke softly of plans, places to explore, stories to tell, dreams yet to be realized. Holding the sketchbook close, Leo slipped it into his bag, a talisman of the journey we had begun. I felt a surge of hope, a quiet certainty that whatever lay ahead, we would face it hand in hand. The unpredictability of life no longer felt like a threat but an invitation, a canvas on which to paint the colors of our shared story. And as we walked into the night, the city's heartbeat matching our own, I knew that this was only the beginning.